have noted that we're restarting. Well, that's because I'm recording on my phone, and apparently even if I don't answer the phone call that's coming in, it shuts off the video. So now my phone is on airplane mode, and we will continue with where we're at. And again, if I'm disjointed, it's because, well, it's 6 hours later after I stopped recording, because I went and did other things lest I threw something. So, we've talked about the different names for the Lord's Supper. If we want to understand what the Lord's Supper is, we look to the words of institution. We look to the words that Jesus spoke when he instituted it. So, let's consider. Our Lord took bread, broke it, and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." All right. Throughout the course of church history, there's been a lot of weird things that have come up with how people teach the Lord's Supper, what they do with it, what's supposed to be done with it. As Lutherans, we think it is very simple. All right, what's supposed to be done with the Lord's Supper? We eat it. We don't just leave it around. We don't just let it hang out. We don't worship it. We don't adore it. We consecrate it. In the service, I will say the words of institution over the bread and the wine, and then what do? We sing and we eat it pretty quickly. That's the point. It's for us to eat. And what does he say to this? This bread that I'm giving to you is my body. The simple truth that we confess is what is often called the real presence, sometimes the bodily presence of Christ. That this bread that has been consecrated and that we receive is Christ's body. Well, Pastor, how in the world could it be Christ's body? Beats the tar to me, but God said so, so therefore it is. Because Jesus is actually quite poignant and adamant that what he is giving us with this bread is his very body, so that we can say this is his body. Greek is an interesting language. You don't actually need to use the word is in Greek. In Greek, you can just say, this a marker. And it'd be perfectly understood that you're talking about this thing is a marker. You don't need to say is. If you say is, if you say esteem, which Jesus does, you're doing something emphatic. You're not just saying this is my body, you're saying this is my body. It's very literal. And this has caused folks a lot of confusion. Throughout the course of history, people have tried to run away from the words of Jesus. They've tried to take this bizarre, wondrous mystery whereby Jesus gives us his own body, the body that was given for us upon the cross, the blood that was shed for us upon the cross for the remission of sin. He actually gives that to us. And that's really hard to ponder. That's really hard to wrap our minds around. So a lot of times people will try to run away with it. A lot of our friends in Protestant churches will end up trying to back away from these words. They'll try to say that it's just a symbol. Well, no, it says this is my body. That you can't get around. This is non-symbolic language. This is blunt language. Moreover, you get warnings in Paul. Paul says the bread that we break, is it not a participation, a real participation in the body of Christ? The cup of blessing that we drink, is it not a participation in Christ? That's not symbolic language. That's really concrete, grounded language. This is also why St. Paul warns in 1 Corinthians that if you abuse the Lord's Supper, if you eat and drink without discerning, without recognizing Christ's body, that it can be harmful to you. Even this is why some of you have gotten ill and some of you have died. the Lord's Supper is Christ's body and blood, and as such, it's to be treated with care. This is also one of the reasons why you guys are going through training for communion. The Lord's Supper is a gift, and it's not meant to scare you. But it's a serious thing. It's a powerful thing. I will liken it to a car. My car is a wonderful thing. I love having a car. I love being able to get into my car and drive. I can easily get both of my cars up to 80, 90 miles an hour, which could be quite dangerous. My Mazda could probably get up over 100 with ease. If you aren't careful with what you're doing with the vehicle, it can be quite dangerous. Which is why I don't just hand the car keys to my 8-year-old Victor and say, oh, go play around. He hasn't been trained. He's not ready to handle it safely. So out of love for him, I'm holding off and saying, no, you don't get to come until I know that you are ready. That's part of what my job is as pastor. As pastor, I am, St. Paul denotes that pastors are stewards of the mysteries. We take care of the mysteries, the wonders, the mind-boggling things of God, and we see that they're taken care of. I make sure that people are baptized. I make sure that the gospel is preached here. I oversee the Lord's Supper, its distribution here. And part of my oversight of that is to make sure that the people who commune are able to commune safely, that they can say, yes, this is what the Lord's Supper is, and this is why I need it. This is why we're doing confirmation class before you guys commune. That way I know that you can recognize what is going on, the great and wonderful gift, and receive it safely and for your benefit. This is my body. We have also take, drink. This cup is the New Testament in my blood. Now here's another really important word. Well, okay, new is important, but I'm going to focus on testament. What's a testament? Well, you might think, well, we've got the Old and New Testaments. Yeah, that works. Sometimes this word is translated as covenant. And you'll see covenant in the Bible in the Old Testament. A covenant was the contract, the deal that God would make between himself and people. Like God did a covenant with Abraham. He said, I will be your God, and from me I will provide you offspring, and all nations will be blessed through them. And it was a binding contract where basically if either party violated, they were condemned to death. Well, yeah, the wages of sin is death. The word in the New Testament that Jesus used here is better translated as testament, because a covenant deals with here's an ongoing agreement. It was sort of like the treaty that would be made at the end of the war. Here's how we're going to deal with things, and if either you break it, things are off. Testament is different. We still use the word testament in something very important in law today. If your parents have a will, properly speaking, they have a last will and testament. And the person who makes a will is called the testator. And a will is a very unique and special contract. It is all about what the testator will give to inheritors when he dies, when the testator dies. A testament establishes this is what the inheritance is. So Jesus, on the night he is betrayed, just before he is crucified, well, let's say this dinner's at around 8 o'clock. Within just over 13, 14, 15 hours, he's on the cross. So, I mean, his death is approaching. But what does he will? This is the New Testament in my blood, given and shed for you for the remission of sin. When I die, says Jesus, you are going to receive this. My body, my blood, the forgiveness of sins and life that comes. Even though I die, I will. Jesus gives himself and forgiveness to us in the supper. Wow, it's probably really messy, but it helps me keep track of what I've said. But this is that whole point. We pay attention. What's going on in the Lord's Supper? Christ Jesus is coming to us in a way that we are able to apprehend, a way that we can touch, a way that we can taste. He gives us his own body and blood, with the result that because he has died, we inherit all that is his. His body, his blood, forgiveness. That is the point. In fact, let's look at the next question. What is the benefit of this eating and drinking? These words, given and shed for you for the forgiveness of sins, show us that in the sacrament, forgiveness of sins, life, and salvation are given us through these words. For where there is forgiveness of sins, there is also life and salvation. This is one of the more important ideas that I can think of. It's actually one of the things from the Catechism that I quote very quietly and subtly in sermons often. We get this connection here. For where there is forgiveness, there is life and salvation. One of the things that I dislike is that so often we make the church things, the religious things, sort of spiritual, abstract, way off there, floating up in the clouds. And if I say something like forgiveness, we might think of, oh, there's some scoreboard way up there in the sky. I've got bad marks against me. Those are my sins. And God wipes them away. And it's all up there, all abstract in our head. No. The Christian faith is very concrete. Take and what? Eat. Take this thing that you can touch, that you can smell, that you can taste, that you can feel, something real, and receive with it forgiveness. And the forgiveness that you receive is real. It's not just some abstract idea, but it has tangible, real consequences in your life, in your existence. You receive, along with forgiveness, life. This makes sense. St. Paul tells us that the wages of sin is death. Think about how sin tangibly makes life worse, how it makes life more difficult. Think about how death impacts things and makes life annoying. We're seeing that more than we'd like to right now. But what the Lord does with his forgiveness is he literally gives us life now. He makes us to be agents, instruments of life in and around death. So when you receive forgiveness, and this is true whether it's the forgiveness spoken, whether you delight in the forgiveness of your baptism, whether it's the tangible forgiveness in the Lord's Supper, whenever you receive forgiveness, you are given life. You are given the strength of God now to go and do good in the midst of a world of death. To be merciful to the people you're stuck in your house with and you're kind of a little getting antsy with them. You're given life and strength to show care and compassion to people. You're also given salvation. You're saved, you're rescued. As a Christian, you have a profoundly interesting impact upon how to view life in this world. Life in this world can be scary. It can be very troubling and worrisome. But no matter what you see, you have received forgiveness, life, and salvation from Christ. And even if you die, you're going to rise. You will rise to life everlasting with Christ because what he gives, he doesn't give in part. He doesn't give chintily. He doesn't give cheaply. He gives everything. And he has promised new heavens, new earth, life of the world to come. All will be yours. And the world full of sin and death can't do a thing to stop it. And that's not just an abstract idea. That's not just a thought. That's not just something running around in our head. That's something real that we can hold on to, that we can take and eat. We can, as the Old Testament would say, taste and see that the Lord is good. And so the Lord gives us this wonderful gift in the Lord's Supper that is designed to be a wonderful, tangible reality of the supper. A tangible reality of his forgiveness. And of course, he says, do this as often. This is one more thing that we should address very quickly. How often do you have to commune? How often do you have to? The wrong question. The Lord's Supper is a gift. It is a wonderful thing. Saying how often you have to commune is sort of like saying, Pastor Brown, how often do you have to tell your wife that you love her? Well, if you're treating it like it's a have to, you've missed the point of what's going on. The Lord's Supper is a gift. And generally, normally, typically, my job as a pastor is to make sure that anyone who wants to receive this gift can receive it often. Normally, we offer communion at least twice a week, Saturday night and Sunday night at service. Plus, I'll go up to Harvest View, give folks their communion once a week. Not once a week, once a month. I'll go visit the shut-ins once a month. If anyone wants it any other time, they can call me and I can set up appointments. That's what we do because I want people to have the gift. But with any good gift, there are times we can take a pause of it when it's for the good of other people. I haven't communed in 3 weeks now, which is the longest I've gone without communing since I was confirmed back in 1991. Simply because with the health going on, we're not having normal services, and none of the people who showed up to help with the service have wanted to commune yet. And that's perfectly fine. We can go without it for a bit. Just as, well, okay. The Lord's Supper is a meal. And one of the things that goes on with a meal, or eating, is that it's a normal, typical thing. You eat so that you are refreshed for what has happened and prepared for what is to come. When you eat your dinner tonight or whenever, that'll strengthen you for all the stuff you did this afternoon, and it will also prepare you for the rest of your night's activities and all the growth that you'll do in the middle of the night because you're so young and growing. Very good. The Lord's Supper is meant to be that continually you're living in it sort of way that we receive God's gifts. So yeah, I will encourage you to receive it often. But there's no law. There's no command that if you have to do it 15 times. No, we're not turning into a law because it's God's gift. In fact, one of my favorite stories is Martin Luther was asked, how often do you have to receive communion? And he kept saying, no, that's the wrong question. That's not the right answer. There's no good answer to it. Till finally he was nagged so much that he said, all right, if you don't get to communion 4 times a year, you might want to think about whether or not you're actually a Christian. Well, of course, a little over 100 years later, people know, well, let's do it only 4 times a year. And the history of communion and such like that it's a very strange and sad history. And what you can see over the course of church history is over and over again, people run away from the simple words of Christ and want to come up with their own things to fix the supper. No, we do what Jesus says in the words of institution. He says, he takes bread, he takes wine. We're using bread and wine. I'm not going to have communion using tacos and Coca-Cola, just because that's not what Jesus set up. It's his supper. And it's a wonderful gift. And I'm looking forward to getting to have it again. And I'm looking forward to when you guys get to have it. Because it is a wonderful thing to participate in. It is a wonderful thing, and it's also utterly normal. Sometimes when we think about religious experiences, we think of these magical mountaintop moments where we expect the heavens to open and the sun to start shining bright. Well, no, that's not the way life normally is. Normally, God's gifts that he gives to us are highly routine. The Lord's Supper is the most wonderful, ordinary thing you'll ever come across. Simple bit of bread, simple bit of wine, and yet with them, Christ Jesus is giving us himself for our forgiveness in a way that is utterly profound, and I still cannot wrap my mind around it fully, and none of us can, and it's a wonderful thing. So, let's see. I think I'm going to pause there on the lecturing. I think that is enough. But I do have a quiz. I've decided I'm not going to give you the full quiz I had written up, because I recycled an old one, and the second part of it really would work better if you had time to sit down and mess around with stuff on pen and paper. So we'll just do 8 true or false questions, and we'll discuss them. And they are right here, so I will hold them on up. And I will read them, and we'll go through the 8, and then we'll discuss them. So do you have your pen and paper ready? All right, close enough. Number 1, true or false? Communion and the Lord's Supper are the same thing. True or false? Communion and the Lord's Supper are the same thing. Oh, good, it is right side up. Question 2. Jesus didn't really mean that we get his body and blood in the supper. True or false? Jesus didn't really mean that we get his body and blood in the supper. Question 3. The Lord's Supper is Christ's body and blood given through bread and wine. True or false? The Lord's Supper is Christ's body and blood given through bread and wine. Question 4. Those who misuse the Lord's Supper sin against Christ's body and blood. Those who misuse the Lord's Supper sin against Christ's body and blood. Question 5. At communion, the bread is transformed into Christ's body and isn't bread anymore. At communion, the bread is transformed into Christ's body and isn't bread anymore. You might have to go over that one. I think I forgot to include that the second time I went around. Okay, it's cool. Question 6. Consecration means blessing and refers to speaking the words of institution over the bread and wine at communion. Excuse me. Consecration means blessing and refers to speaking the words of institution over the bread and wine at communion. I forgot that the first lecture, but I remembered it this time. Question 7. If a person communes, they receive Christ's body even if they don't believe. If a person communes, they receive Christ's body even if they don't believe. And question 8. Jesus teaches that we are to receive the supper often. Jesus teaches that we are to receive the supper often. So, let's go over these. Number 1. Communion and the Lord's Supper are the same thing. That's true. They're some of the different names for the same thing. They have different nuances, but they both refer to the same thing. Question 2. Jesus didn't really mean that we get his body and blood in the supper. That's false. Jesus means what he says. The words mean what they say. That's what we keep our focus on. Pay attention to what Jesus actually says. In fact, I would hope that when you hear me preach, or when you hear any pastor preach, you listen to how they treat the words of Jesus. Do they treat the words as though they mean what they say? Are they trying to say, this is what the scriptures are saying, or are they going off on their own tangents of their own creation, their own thoughts? My own thoughts aren't important. What's important is, what does Jesus say? And Jesus says, this is my body. All right, question 3. The Lord's Supper is Christ's body and blood given through bread and wine. That's true. Sometimes, like in the catechism, we say given under bread and wine, sometimes through. Another one that you might come across is sometimes people will say in, with, and under. We're not trying to figure out precisely how, because the how it works is beyond us. But with this bread and wine, at the same time, Jesus gives us his body and blood, so that I can say this bread is his body, this wine is his blood. How does that work? Beats the tar to me, but Jesus said so, so we believe. Number 5, this is what I skipped. At communion, the bread is transformed into Christ's body and isn't bread anymore. The answer is false, and I hope you might have been able to derive that from just how often I would say, this bread is his body. That we... That we understand that there's a thing going on at the same time, that it is the sacramental union of communion. That the element is attached and is with his body at the same time. That question refers to what our Roman Catholic friends teach. And Luther noted three main things that he thought were problematic with the way the Roman Catholic Church taught in his time. First, they taught a doctrine called transubstantiation. I may have misspelled it because it's a big, long, ginormous word. Which was a theory that started getting kicked around 1000 AD, and it was officially made official doctrine at the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, whereby you were supposedly bound to believe it. And it's an attempt to try to explain what happens in the Lord's Supper. Our Roman Catholic friends are very good and apt when they acknowledge that what we get in the Lord's Supper is Christ's body. But instead of just saying, this is his body given to us through this bread, they want to explain the how it worked. And instead of just paying attention to the words, they started to come up with theories of how God could do this. And the idea that they came up was that the substance of it, what it really was transformed by the words of the institution, while it still looked like bread and wine. So they'd say, well, while it might look like bread and wine, it's not really bread and wine, it's just Christ's body. And I suppose, as a theory goes, that's interesting, but that's not what the scriptures say. In fact, Paul says, this bread that we break, is it not Christ's body? There's an equal sign there. You got to have both sides of the equal sign. They want to get rid of the one side. And no, you don't do that. So we have had a qualm with that. It tries to solve the mystery of what's going on. Don't try to explain to God what he's doing. Let God be God. The other issues that Rome had, I'll address these very quickly. The second one was denying the chalice to the laity. In Luther's day, when they celebrated communion in the Roman Catholic Church, everyone would receive the host, would receive Christ's body. But when it came time for taking and drinking, y'all wouldn't. Only the priest would, only the bishop would. And that arose for kind of practical reasons. People were getting freaked out, things were spilling, so they said, okay, so just so we don't have any spills, we'll just let the priest drink, no one else can. Well, I suppose that's a fine idea to try to solve problems of spillage, but Jesus said, take and drink of it, all of you, this cup. So again, pay attention to what Jesus says and don't try to come up with practical solutions around what he says. The third one, which is actually most problematic, is an idea called the sacrifice of the Mass. And in that idea, if you were, in fact still are I should note this. In Vatican II, in the 1960s, the Roman Catholic Church changed this and said, all right, no, the laity should receive as well. So they've actually fixed this. It took them 450 years, but they listened to us on one of the things we complained about. So good job, Ray. Now on to the sacrifice of the Mass. If you are a Roman Catholic priest, every day you are required to celebrate the Lord's Supper, often by yourself if no one else is around. I don't do that because my job is to give communion to people. You don't commune by yourself, you commune together. But they would they'd celebrate the Lord's Supper by themselves because they were offering a sacrifice. The Roman Catholics teach the Lord's Supper is an unbloody sacrifice, a re-sacrificing of Jesus. And that by the priest doing this, it garners or gathers merit before God in heaven. that we offer up cool stuff to God. We offer it up to God, and then God is pleased with us. And so they're bound to do that daily, because that's their job. They have to do the daily sacrifice. If you talk about language of sacrifice, you talk about what you're giving to God. A sacrifice is an upward movement. Here, God, take this. That's not how Jesus talks about the Lord's Supper. The Lord's Supper is a gift from God coming to us. Listen again. Take, eat, this is my body, which is given for you. Take and drink. This is the cup of the New Testament, my blood, which is shed for you for the forgiveness of sins. The Lord's Supper isn't something we offer up to God. It's a gift whereby Jesus gives himself to us and comes to us. So they get the direction of what's going on in the Lord's Supper backwards. They put the emphasis on what we're doing when the emphasis should be on what Jesus has done and is giving to us. And so they flip the boat. But I'd argue Rome flips the boat on a lot of things and wants to make things more about what we do rather than what Jesus is doing. So that's that point there. All right, question 6. Yeah, we're back to the quiz. Let's get back to the middle of it. Consecration means blessing and refers to speaking the words of institution over the bread and wine at communion. Yes, that's what. To consecrate literally means to make something holy. And the words of institution being spoken over the bread is called the consecration. That is the point where that bread which had been just bread and that wine which had been just wine has been set apart by the word of God and made holy, and in, with, and under it now is Christ's body and blood for us Christians to drink and eat and drink. There. All right. Question 7. If a person communes, they receive Christ's body even if they don't believe. That is true. This is why we take care with who I let commune, because I want to make sure that you are prepared to be in the Lord's presence, that you are baptized, that you are forgiven, that you know what is going on so that you can receive it safely, because, well, you don't mess around with the presence of God. All right, and question 8. Jesus teaches that we are to receive the supper often. That answer is true. Yep. And hopefully, when health and safety concerns of the nation allow, we'll be able to start having the supper often. And once you're confirmed, I hope that you receive the Lord's Supper often. That becomes a normal part of your life. So that's what I have for this time. For the next lesson, we're going to do parts 3 and 4 of the Lord's Supper. That's what it's page 335 through 345, I think. Yeah, I think that's what it is. So yeah, 335 through 345 in your catechism. Please do read that. I'm thinking we're going to do 2 more lectures. I will do one on the second part of the Lord's Supper, parts 3 and 4. And then I want to do one final just wrap up where I can go and give final bits of wisdom and stuff like that. If you have any questions, text me. You can send them to me on Facebook message. You can email me, and then I'll try to get them wrapped up in the final lecture and all that. And we'll see you guys around when we can see you. So, all right, that'll work. Have fun. The Lord be with you, and I will see you later. And hopefully this recorded. Let's go see. Did it work? Yatta! That's Japanese for like it did it celebratory. All right, have a good one. Bye.